The house felt like a tomb. That's what I thought when I woke up to the sound of my own breathing echoing off bare walls. 3 days ago, this place had been home to a family of 4. Now it was just me, Jim Tate, sitting on the edge of a king-sized bed that suddenly felt enormous. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The movers had been efficient. Beth made sure of that. While I was working a 14-hour shift rewiring the new hospital wing, she'd orchestrated the dismantling of our 12-year marriage with military precision. My daughter's rooms were stripped clean, not even a crayon mark left on the walls. The family photos were gone from the hallway. Even the good coffee maker had vanished. I shuffled to the kitchen in yesterday's clothes, my work boots echoing on hardwood floors that used to be covered by the Persian rug Beth's mother gave us. The divorce papers sat on the granite counter like a death certificate, next to a note written in Beth's careful handwriting. Jim, I've taken what's mine. The girls will stay with me. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. B. Don't make this harder? I laughed, but it came out like a bark. The woman who'd been screwing my business partner behind my back for God knows how long was telling me not to make things difficult. My phone buzzed. A text from Danny Rodriguez, my foreman. Boss, John called in sick again. 3rd time this week. We're behind on the Riverside project. John, my older brother, my business partner, the man I'd trusted with everything, including apparently my wife. I poured instant coffee into a chipped mug, even the good cups were gone, and walked to the front window. Mrs. Zimmerman from next door was already positioned at her kitchen window, pretending to wash dishes while keeping watch. When she saw me, she practically pressed her nose against the glass. 5 minutes later, she was at my door with a casserole and a hungry expression. Jim, honey, I'm so sorry about all this mess, she said, pushing past me into the empty living room. I saw the moving trucks, saw Beth loading up her BMW like she was fleeing a crime scene. Thanks for the food, Mrs. Z. That woman never deserved you, she continued, settling onto my couch like she planned to stay. Running around town with that brother of yours, bold as brass, everyone's talking about it. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Everyone's talking about what? Mrs. Zimmerman's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Oh, honey, you didn't know. Beth's been living in that fancy penthouse on Harbor Row for 2 weeks now. John's place. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. The coffee tasted like ash. 2 weeks. While I was working 16-hour days to keep our electrical contracting business afloat, my wife and brother had been playing house in his luxury apartment. I saw them at Romano's last Tuesday, Mrs. Z continued, warming to her subject, holding hands right there at the bar. Beth was wearing that red dress, you know the one, and John was all over her like a rash. I set down the coffee before I threw it. Mrs. Z, I appreciate the information, but... And that's not all, she interrupted. Marissa Chen was with them. You remember Marissa, Beth's friend from the country club? She was practically cheering them on, taking pictures with her phone like it was some kind of celebration. Marissa, Beth's best friend and self-appointed life coach. The woman who'd convinced Beth she was settling when she married me. The one who'd been pushing Beth toward divorce for years, claiming she deserved better than a blue-collar electrician. After Mrs. Zimmerman finally left, I sat in my empty living room and tried to piece together the timeline. John had been sick a lot lately. Beth had been working late at her marketing job. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. I walked upstairs to what used to be our bedroom and started going through Beth's things, the stuff she'd left behind in her hurry to start her new life. In the back of her nightstand drawer, I found something interesting. A second phone. A cheap prepaid model she'd hidden behind her jewelry box. My hands shook as I powered it on. No password protection. Beth always was careless about security. The text messages told the whole story. John, can't wait to get rid of him. You deserve so much better. Beth, soon. Just need to make sure I get half of everything. John, More than half. I know where all the business assets are hidden. The photos were worse. Intimate pictures of Beth and John in his apartment, in my office, even in my own bed. Timestamps going back 8 months. But the final message thread made my vision blur with rage. Beth. He's so clueless. Still thinks you're the loyal brother. John. Always was the stupid one. Dad knew it too. Beth. After the divorce, we can push him out of the business completely. John. He built it, but he's too trusting to protect it. I sat on my empty bedroom floor, holding the phone that contained the evidence of my complete destruction. My wife, my brother, my business, my family. They'd taken it all while I was working myself to death trying to provide for them. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I'd learned a few things in my 20 years as an electrician and 10 years before that in the Army. I knew how systems worked. Electrical systems, security systems, people systems. I knew how to find weaknesses and exploit them, and I knew how to be patient. Beth and John thought they were dealing with stupid Jim, the trusting brother, the devoted husband. They were about to meet a different version of me entirely. I forwarded every photo and message from the secret phone to my own device, then carefully deleted the evidence from Beth's phone and put it back where I found it. Let them think their secrets were safe. My phone rang. John's name on the caller ID. "Hey, Jim," he said, his voice rough like he'd been drinking. "Sorry I can't make it to the site today. This flu is really kicking my ass." "No problem," I said, my voice steady. "Take care of yourself." "You sound weird. Everything okay?" "Just tired. Long week." "Yeah, well, hang in there. Things will get better." Things will get better. For who? After I hung up, I walked to my home office and pulled out the business incorporation papers. John was listed as a partner, but I'd been careful when we set up the company. I owned 51%. He owned 49%. At the time, he joked about me being a control freak. Turns out my paranoia was going to save me. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls. First to my lawyer, then to my accountant, then to the bank. By noon, I'd moved all the business accounts to a new bank and changed every password John had access to. I also discovered something interesting. John had been skimming money from the business for months, probably to pay for his fancy apartment and expensive dates with my wife. That gave me leverage. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the divorce. So sorry. Beth deserves to be happy." "Marissa." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thanks. I'm sure you'll take good care of her." Within an hour, I had another text, this one from Kelly Patterson, Beth's younger sister. "Can't believe you're putting Beth through this. She's devastated." Devastated. Right. I was formulating my response when Danny showed up at my door, holding 2 beers and wearing his usual concerned expression. "Heard about the divorce," he said, pushing a beer into my hands. "Thought you might need some company." Danny Rodriguez had been my foreman for 8 years. He was loyal, hardworking, and had a gift for reading people. He was also the closest thing to a friend I had left. "How bad is it?" I asked. "The gossip? Pretty bad. But here's the thing. Most people are on your side. Everyone knows John's a snake and Beth—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Let's just say her reputation around town isn't what it used to be." We sat in my empty living room, drinking beer and talking about the business. Danny had some interesting insights about John's recent behavior. "He's been making promises to the crew," Danny said. "Telling them there might be changes coming, better pay, better benefits, acting like he's going to be running things soon." "Is that right?" "Yeah, and there's something else. Jessica, my girlfriend, she's been hanging around Marissa Chen lately. Says Marissa's been bragging about how Beth's going to be set for life after the divorce." Jessica, Danny's 23-year-old girlfriend who worked at the local bank. I'd always suspected she was more interested in Danny's steady paycheck than Danny himself. What kind of bragging? Something about Beth getting half the business plus alimony plus the house. Marissa keeps saying Beth's finally going to get what she deserves. I nodded thoughtfully. Danny, can I ask you something personal? Sure. How well do you really know Jessica? His face clouded over. What do you mean? I mean, has she been acting different lately? More secretive? Danny was quiet for a long moment. Actually, yeah, she has been. Why? Just a feeling. You might want to keep your eyes open. After Danny left, I spent the evening planning. Beth and John thought they'd won, but the game was just beginning. They'd taken my family and tried to steal my business. Now I was going to show them what real loss felt like. I started with Jessica. Jessica Martinez had been dating Danny for 6 months, and in that time, she'd managed to convince him she was pregnant twice, needed money for her sick mother 3 times, and required his help moving apartments 4 different occasions. Danny, being a decent guy who'd never met a sob story he couldn't fix, had fallen for every single manipulation. But I'd been watching Jessica, and I'd noticed some interesting patterns. Tuesday morning, I drove to the bank where Jessica worked as a teller. I waited in the parking lot until I saw her walk out for her lunch break, then followed her to the medical plaza across town. She went into Dr. Sarah Williams's office, the same gynecologist Beth used to see. Interesting. That afternoon, I called Danny into my office at the job site. How's Jessica feeling? I asked casually. His face lit up. Great, actually. Morning sickness is finally easing up. We're going to tell her parents about the baby this weekend. That's wonderful. How far along is she now? 12 weeks. Just got out of the danger zone, you know? I nodded sympathetically. Must be exciting. I remember when Beth was pregnant with Sarah. All those doctor appointments. Yeah, Jessica's been going every week. Very thorough doctor. Every week for 12 weeks. That seemed excessive, even for a high-risk pregnancy. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I used my connections at the medical plaza. I'd rewired their entire building 2 years ago to get some information about Jessica's appointments. What I discovered was illuminating. Jessica had been seeing Dr. Williams regularly, but not for prenatal care. She'd been getting birth control injections. The last one was 3 days ago. I sat in my empty house, staring at the medical records I probably shouldn't have been able to access, and felt a familiar anger building. Jessica was running the same kind of con on Danny that Beth had been running on me. Different lies, same manipulation. The next morning, I made a phone call to Danny's phone while he was in the bathroom at the job site. When Jessica answered, I disguised my voice slightly. This is Dr. Williams's office calling to confirm Jessica Martinez's appointment for her birth control injection next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Oh, yes, Jessica said without thinking. I'll be there. Perfect. And just to confirm, you'll need to fast for 12 hours before the injection, as usual. Got it. Thanks. I hung up and waited. Danny came back from the bathroom looking confused. Weird, he said. Jessica just got a call from her doctor about some injection appointment. She looked really nervous. Probably just routine, I said. That afternoon, I did something that would have made Beth proud of my manipulative skills. I called Jessica's mother, Mrs. Martinez, and introduced myself as Danny's boss. I wanted to congratulate you on the upcoming grandchild, I said warmly. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, what? Jessica's pregnancy. Danny's so excited to be a father. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Tate, I think there's been some confusion. Jessica isn't pregnant. Are you sure? Danny seems very certain. Jessica has endometriosis, Mrs. Martinez interrupted. She's been on hormone treatments for years to prevent pregnancy. Her doctor says it would be nearly impossible for her to conceive naturally. Bingo. I see, I said carefully. Perhaps I misunderstood. I'm sorry to have bothered you. No. I'm glad you called. I think Jessica and I need to have a conversation. I hung up feeling like I'd just lit the first fuse on a very large firework. The explosion came the next day. Danny showed up at the job site looking like he'd been hit by a truck. "Jessica's been lying to me," he said without preamble. "About everything. The pregnancy, her mother being sick, even her job at the bank. Turns out she got fired 3 weeks ago for stealing from customer accounts. I'm sorry, man." Her own mother called her out in front of me, said Jessica's been pulling this fake pregnancy scam on guys for years. I feel like such an idiot. I put a hand on his shoulder. "You're not an idiot. You're a good guy who trusted someone. That's not a character flaw." "Yeah, well, it feels like one right now." Danny's situation was a perfect mirror of my own, just on a smaller scale. We'd both been betrayed by people we trusted, both been made to look like fools. The difference was, Danny's betrayal was out in the open now. Mine was still playing out in secret. That evening, I got a text from Beth. "Need to talk. Can you meet me at Romano's tomorrow night?" Romano's. The same restaurant where Mrs. Zimmerman had seen her with John. The audacity was breathtaking. I texted back, "Sure, 7 p.m. I spent the next day preparing for what I suspected would be Beth's attempt to manipulate me into a favorable divorce settlement. She'd probably try to play the victim, maybe even attempt some fake reconciliation to throw me off balance. But I had a few surprises of my own planned. Romano's was crowded when I arrived, which was perfect for what I had in mind. Beth was already seated at a corner table, wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Her strategy was obvious. Look beautiful, act vulnerable, make me remember what I was losing. "Jim," she said as I sat down, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You look tired." "I've been working." "You always work too much. That was part of our problem." Our problem. Like she'd had nothing to do with it. "So what did you want to talk about?" I asked. She took a deep breath, like she was gathering courage. "I want you to know that I never meant for things to happen this way. John and I, it just happened. We tried to fight it, but—" "How long?" I interrupted. "What?" "How long have you been sleeping with my brother?" Her face flushed. "Jim, please, can't we be civilized about this?" 8 months, I said calmly. "That's how long. I know about the secret phone, Beth. I know about the photos. I know about your plans to push me out of my own business." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my own phone and showed her one of the photos she'd sent to John, the one taken in our bedroom. "This was taken on my birthday, while I was downstairs making you breakfast in bed." Beth stared at the photo, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice still calm. "You're going to get exactly what the law entitles you to in the divorce. Nothing more. You're not getting half my business, because you never had any claim to it. You're not getting alimony, because you've been committing adultery. And you're sure as hell not getting my house." "You can't prove anything," she whispered. I showed her another photo, this one of her and John in his apartment. "Actually, I can prove everything. The question is whether you want this to be a quiet divorce or a public spectacle." Beth's eyes filled with tears, real ones, I thought, though with her it was hard to tell. "Jim, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work this out. We have history together. We have children. We had children. Now you have children, and I have visitation rights. It doesn't have to be this way." "You're right," I said, standing up. "It didn't have to be this way. But you made your choice 8 months ago. Now you get to live with the consequences." I left her sitting at the table, crying into her wine. Several people in the restaurant had noticed the drama, and I could see them whispering to each other. By tomorrow, the whole story would be all over town. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. When I got home, I found John waiting in my driveway. He was leaning against his BMW, arms crossed, trying to look intimidating. It might have worked if I hadn't seen the photos of him crying after Beth rejected one of his sexual advances. "We need to talk," he said, as I got out of my truck. Do we? Beth told me about your little stunt at the restaurant. Very mature, Jim. I thought it was pretty restrained, actually. John stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage. Look, I know you're hurt, but this doesn't have to get ugly. Beth and I are together now. That's just reality. But we can still be brothers. We can still run the business together. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I'd never noticed what a snake he was. The fake concern, the condescending tone, the assumption that I'd just roll over and accept his betrayal. You're fired, I said. He laughed. You can't fire me, I'm a partner. Minority partner. Check the incorporation papers. His smile faded. Jim, be reasonable. You need me. I handle all the big contracts, all the client relationships. You handle the clients you're stealing from. I know about the skimming, John. I know about the fake invoices and the padded expense reports. Keep pushing me, and your next conversation will be with the district attorney. For the first time since this whole mess started, John looked genuinely worried. You're bluffing. Am I? Want to find out? He stared at me for a long moment, then got back in his car without another word. As he drove away, I noticed Mrs. Zimmerman watching from her window, probably taking notes for tomorrow's neighborhood gossip session. Perfect. I went inside and poured myself a beer, then sat down to plan the next phase of my campaign. Beth and John had declared war on my life. Now, they were going to learn what it felt like to have their own lives systematically dismantled, and I was just getting started. The next morning brought two interesting developments. First, I received a call from my lawyer confirming that John had been locked out of all business accounts and would be receiving a formal termination notice by the end of the day. Second, Danny showed up at my house with coffee and news. Jessica's been telling people you're the reason we broke up, he said, settling into one of my remaining kitchen chairs. Says you filled my head with lies about her. Are you worried about that? Hell no, but it got me thinking about something. Jessica's been hanging around with Marissa Chen a lot lately, and Marissa's been feeding information to Beth about the business. What if Jessica was planted? I looked up from my coffee. Planted? Think about it. Jessica shows up right around the time Beth and John started their affair. She immediately targets me, your most trusted employee. She starts asking questions about the business, about your personal life. What if the whole thing was a setup? It was an interesting theory, and it would explain some of Jessica's behavior, but it also suggested a level of planning and manipulation that was frankly impressive in its scope. You might be right, I said, but it doesn't matter now. She's out of your life, and John's out of the business. What's your next move? I smiled. I'm going to let them make the next move. Beth and John are angry and desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Marissa Chen called me directly. Jim, we need to talk, she said in her usual imperious tone. What you're doing to Beth is unconscionable. What I'm doing to Beth. Cutting off her credit cards, freezing her out of the business accounts, threatening John. She's a mess. She should have thought about that before she decided to destroy our marriage. Marriage is work, Jim. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to your wife instead of your precious electrical business. Marissa, I interrupted, let me ask you something. How long have you known about Beth and John? Silence. Because I'm looking at photos here that suggest you were not only aware of the affair, but actively encouraging it. There's one particularly interesting shot of you taking pictures of them at Romano's. More silence. So, here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to stay out of my divorce, stop giving Beth advice, and pray I don't decide to share these photos with your husband. Because I'm betting David doesn't know about your little role in all this. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I hung up and immediately called David Chen, Marissa's husband and one of the city's most prominent divorce attorneys. David, it's Jim Tate. I was wondering if you might have time to handle my divorce. Jim, I appreciate the call, but you know Marissa and Beth are close friends. It would be a conflict of interest. Actually, I don't think it would. You see, I have some evidence that suggests Marissa has been actively participating in Beth's affair, encouraging it, documenting it, even helping to plan it. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I'll send you the photos, I continued. You can decide for yourself whether you want to represent me or not. But either way, I thought you should know what your wife has been up to. 20 minutes later, David called me back. I'll take your case, he said quietly. I thought you might. By evening, the local gossip network was buzzing with news that David Chen was representing me in the divorce, and that there had been a major scene at the Chen household. Mrs. Zimmerman was practically vibrating with excitement when she called to give me the update. Marissa came home to find David waiting with a suitcase and divorce papers, she reported breathlessly. The whole neighborhood heard the screaming match, David staying at the Marriott downtown. That's unfortunate, I said, trying to sound sympathetic. Oh, it gets better. Kelly Patterson, Beth's sister, she's been running her mouth on social media all day, calling you every name in the book. But then someone started posting screenshots of Beth's secret messages in the comments. Kelly deleted everything and made her account private. Kelly. Beth's 25-year-old sister who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow maintained a luxury lifestyle through a combination of family money and social media sponsorships. She'd always treated me like I wasn't good enough for her precious sister. Any idea who posted the screenshots? I asked innocently. No, but whoever it was, they had access to some very private information, very detailed, very damaging information. I thanked Mrs. Zimmerman for the update and hung up, feeling satisfied with the day's progress. Beth's support network was crumbling, John was cut off from the business, and their little conspiracy was being exposed piece by piece. But the real test was still coming. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Sarah Lane of the city police. Mr. Tate, I need to speak with you about some allegations that have been made. My blood ran cold. What kind of allegations? Your wife has filed a complaint claiming you've been harassing and threatening her. She says you've been following her, breaking into her apartment, and making threatening phone calls. I took a deep breath. This was exactly the kind of desperate move I'd been expecting. Detective, I'd be happy to speak with you. When would be convenient? How about now? I'm in the parking lot outside your house. Detective Lane was a tall, no-nonsense woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, notepad open, studying my face as I answered her questions. Mrs. Tate says you've been calling her at all hours, making threats about what you'll do if she doesn't come back. I haven't called Beth once since she moved out, I said calmly. You can check my phone records. She also says you broke into her apartment and left threatening messages. I've never been to her apartment. I assume it has security cameras? Detective Lane made a note. What about following her? She says you've been showing up places where she goes. The only place I've seen Beth since she moved out was Romano's restaurant, where she asked me to meet her for dinner. We discussed the divorce. She says that conversation was threatening in nature. I pulled out my phone and showed Detective Lane the photos from Beth's secret device. Detective, I think you should see these before we go any further. Lane studied the photos, her expression growing more skeptical by the minute. Where did you get these? Beth left a second phone in our house when she moved out. I found it and discovered evidence of an 8-month affair with my business partner. There are also text messages discussing plans to steal my business and frame me for domestic abuse. I showed her the relevant message threads. Lane read them carefully, taking notes. Mr. Tate, I'm going to be honest with you. This looks like a woman who's been caught cheating and is trying to control the narrative. That's my assessment as well. However, I still need to investigate her claims. I'll be checking security footage, phone records, and interviewing witnesses. If I find out you have been harassing her, you won't, I said confidently, because I haven't. After Detective Lane left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about Beth's strategy. She was trying to paint me as an abusive, threatening ex-husband. It was a smart move. It would give her sympathy in the divorce proceedings and potentially even get me arrested. But she'd made a crucial error. She'd filed a false police report, which was a crime, and I had evidence that she was lying. I called David Chen. "David, I just had a visit from the police. Beth filed a harassment complaint against me." "I'm not surprised. It's a common tactic in contentious divorces. The thing is, she's lying. I can prove it." "How?" "Security cameras, phone records, witnesses. Plus, I have text messages where she discusses framing me for abuse." David was quiet for a moment. "Jim, if you can prove she filed a false police report, we can use that in the divorce proceedings. It goes to her credibility." "That's what I was hoping you'd say." "But be careful. If she's desperate enough to involve the police, she might escalate further." David was right to be concerned. That evening, I came home from the job site to find my front door standing open and my house ransacked. Furniture overturned, drawers emptied, papers scattered everywhere. I called 911 immediately. Detective Lane arrived with 2 patrol officers and a crime scene photographer. As they documented the break-in, I walked through the house checking what was missing. "Anything valuable taken?" Lane asked. "That's the strange part. The TV is still here, my tools are untouched, even the cash I keep in my desk drawer is still there." "What about personal documents?" I checked my file cabinet. "Some business papers are missing. Financial records, client contracts, that kind of thing." Lane raised an eyebrow. "The kind of documents that might be useful in a divorce proceeding?" "Exactly." "Mr. Tate, do you have any security cameras on the property?" I smiled. "Actually, I do. I installed them last month after some tools went missing from job sites. They cover the front door, back door, and driveway." 20 minutes later, we were watching high-definition footage of John using a key to enter my house, followed by Beth and Marissa. The timestamp showed they'd been inside for over an hour, systematically searching through my belongings. "Well," Detective Lane said dryly, "this is interesting." "Is it enough to arrest them?" "Breaking and entering, theft, conspiracy. Yeah, I think we can make some arrests." I watched the footage again, focusing on Beth's face as she rifled through my personal belongings. She looked angry, desperate, and completely different from the vulnerable woman who'd cried at Romano's. "Detective," I said, "I want to press full charges." "Are you sure? These are serious felonies. Your wife and brother could go to prison." I thought about the 8 months of lies, the stolen business documents, the fake police report, and the systematic destruction of my life. "I'm sure." By midnight, Beth, John, and Marissa were all in custody. The local news picked up the story, and by morning, the whole town was talking about the divorce burglary that had shocked the quiet community. But I knew this was just the beginning. Beth and John had declared war, and now they were going to discover what it felt like to fight someone who had nothing left to lose. The arrests made the front page of the local newspaper. "Divorce turns criminal. Local woman and accomplices arrested in burglary," ran alongside photos of Beth, John, and Marissa being led away in handcuffs. Mrs. Zimmerman called me 3 times before 7 a.m. to discuss the shocking developments. "I always knew that Beth was trouble," she declared during her 3rd call. "But I never thought she'd stoop to actual crime." The truth was, I hadn't expected it either. I'd anticipated manipulation, lies, maybe even some financial shenanigans. But breaking into my house was a level of desperation that surprised even me. Danny showed up at the job site with coffee and a newspaper. "Boss, you're famous," he said, spreading the paper out on my desk. "They're calling it the Harbor Row Scandal." The article was thorough and damaging. It detailed the affair, the business partnership dispute, and the burglary. It also mentioned that John had been terminated from the electrical contracting business for financial irregularities. "How are the guys taking it?" I asked, referring to our crew. "They're behind you 100%. Nobody liked John anyway. He was always talking down to them, acting like he was better than everyone else. That was true. John had always seen himself as the business brains of the operation, while I was just the technical guy. He'd made it clear to everyone that he considered manual labor beneath him. What about the clients? Actually, that's the weird part. We've gotten 3 new contracts since the story broke. Apparently, people like the idea of supporting the wronged husband. My phone rang, Beth's number. "Don't answer it," Danny advised. But I was curious. "Jim Tate." "Jim, please, we need to talk." Beth's voice was shaky, desperate. "This has gotten completely out of hand." "Has it? I'm facing felony charges. They're talking about 3 to 5 years in prison. That's what happens when you commit felonies. Please, I know I made mistakes, but I never meant for it to go this far. Can't we work something out?" I looked at Danny, who was shaking his head vigorously. "Beth, you broke into my house and stole my property. You filed a false police report. You conspired to destroy my business. What exactly did you think was going to happen?" "I was desperate. John said you were going to leave me with nothing." "So you decided to take everything first?" She started crying. Real tears this time, I thought. "Jim, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, isn't there some way to fix this?" I felt a moment of pity for her. Despite everything she'd done, we'd been married for 12 years. We'd had children together. She'd been part of my life for so long that seeing her destroyed felt strange. But then I remembered the photos on her secret phone. The text messages about pushing me out of my own business. The months of lies and manipulation. "Beth, you made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." "What about the girls? They need their mother." That hit harder than I expected. Sarah and Emma were innocent in all this. They didn't deserve to have their mother in prison. "That's something you should have considered before you committed multiple felonies," I said, but my voice was softer. After I hung up, Danny studied my face. "You're not thinking about dropping the charges, are you?" "I don't know. Maybe." "Boss, listen to me. These people tried to destroy you. They would have succeeded if you hadn't been smarter than they were. You dropped these charges, and what's to stop them from trying again?" He was right, but the thought of my daughters visiting their mother in prison made me sick. That afternoon, I got a call from David Chen. "Jim, I've got some news. John's lawyer contacted me about a plea deal." "What kind of plea deal?" "John's willing to sign over his share of the business to you in exchange for you dropping the charges." "What about Beth?" "She's willing to agree to a no-contest divorce with minimal alimony and shared custody of the children." "And Marissa?" "She's offering to testify against both of them in exchange for a reduced sentence." I sat back in my chair, thinking. It was a tempting offer. I'd get my business back, keep my daughters in my life, and avoid a lengthy court battle. "What's your advice, David?" "Legally, you hold all the cards. You have evidence of adultery, theft, breaking and entering, and filing a false police report. You could destroy all 3 of them in court." But your daughters are going to suffer either way. At least this way, their mother doesn't go to prison." That evening, I sat in my empty house and tried to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to see Beth and John pay for what they'd done. They'd tried to steal everything I'd worked for, destroy my reputation, and frame me for crimes I didn't commit. But another part of me was just tired. Tired of the anger, tired of the plotting, tired of the constant stress. Maybe it was time to end this war and try to rebuild my life. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife got what she deserved. Some of us have been waiting years for someone to put her in her place." Then another. "John always was a snake. Glad you finally figured it out." And another. "You're a hero for standing up to those bullies." I realized that this whole situation had become public entertainment for the town. People were choosing sides, gossiping about the details, treating my personal tragedy like a soap opera. That decided it for me. I called David Chen. "I want to accept the plea deal," I said. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, but I have some additional conditions." "Name them." "John signs a non-compete agreement. He can't work in the electrical contracting business in this state for 5 years. That's reasonable. Beth agrees to supervised visitation with the girls until she completes anger management and financial counseling. Also reasonable. And I want a public apology, from all 3 of them. In the newspaper, acknowledging what they did and taking full responsibility." David was quiet for a moment. "That's unusual." "It's non-negotiable. They destroyed my reputation publicly. I want it restored publicly. I'll see what I can do." The negotiations took 3 days. John's lawyer tried to argue that the non-compete agreement was too restrictive. Beth's lawyer claimed that supervised visitation was punitive. Marissa's lawyer wanted the public apology requirement dropped entirely. But I held firm. They could take the deal or face trial. In the end, they took the deal. The public apology ran in the same newspaper that had covered their arrests. It was a full-page ad, paid for by John, with individual statements from each of them. "I, John Tate, acknowledge that I betrayed my brother's trust by engaging in an affair with his wife and attempting to steal his business. I take full responsibility for my actions and the harm they caused. I am deeply sorry and ashamed of my behavior. John Tate. I, Beth Tate, acknowledge that I destroyed my marriage through adultery and attempted to frame my husband for crimes he did not commit. My actions were inexcusable and caused tremendous harm to my family. I am seeking counseling and am committed to being a better person and mother. Beth Tate. I, Marissa Chen, acknowledge that I encouraged and participated in the destruction of the Tate family through my support of an adulterous affair. I violated the trust of friends and acted without regard for the consequences. I am deeply ashamed and sorry for my role in these events. Marissa Chen. The apology was the talk of the town for weeks. Mrs. Zimmerman called it unprecedented and the most dramatic thing to happen here since the mill fire of 1987. But for me, it was closure. John moved to Florida, where he took a job as a sales representative for an appliance company. Beth moved into a small apartment across town and started working as a receptionist at a dental office. Marissa and David divorced, and she moved back to her parents' house in Vermont. The business thrived. Without John's skimming and poor management, profits increased by 40% in 6 months. I hired 2 new electricians and promoted Danny to assistant manager. My relationship with my daughters slowly improved. They spent weekends with me, and I made sure those weekends were filled with activities they enjoyed. I never spoke negatively about their mother, and gradually they began to trust me again. 6 months after the plea deal was finalized, I was working late at the office when Beth called. "Jim, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For not sending me to prison. I know I didn't deserve your mercy. You're the mother of my children. They need you. I'm in counseling now. Real counseling, not just the court-ordered stuff. I'm starting to understand how badly I screwed up." "That's good, Beth. I know I can never undo what I did, but I want you to know that I regret it. All of it. I know. Are you happy now?" I thought about that question. Was I happy? I had my business back, my reputation restored, and a relationship with my daughters. I'd defeated the people who tried to destroy me, and I'd done it without becoming a monster myself. "I'm content," I said finally. "That's more than I deserve to hear." After she hung up, I sat in my office and looked out at the harbor. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and red. In a few hours, I'd go home to my quiet house, eat dinner alone, and watch TV until I fell asleep. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was my life. I'd fought for it, defended it, and won it back through a combination of intelligence, patience, and sheer stubborn determination. Beth and John had tried to write me out of my own story. Instead, they'd written themselves out of theirs. I finished my paperwork, locked up the office, and drove home through the quiet streets of my small town. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new possibilities. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was at peace.